Thank you very much for joining the groups, and we had problems with the callers. We had initially 75 people. We divided them into 10 groups, but some were not able to attend. Others left early. That's why we reorganized the group. Before we start with this workshop, I would like if you could please, all of you have your cell phone or have access to the internet via your computer, correct? We will come up with a survey. A quick question. What I will ask from you in your cell phone or in your computer, please go to www.menti.com. Are you ready? Were you all able to log in?
¿Listo? Ahora, una vez han ingresado, ¿pueden por favor poner este código 2825?
And please use the code 282593 282593.
¿Listo? Ahora lo que les voy a pedir a ustedes es que
Now,
respondan esta pregunta.
please answer the following question. And this is about climate change. The question is, how much are you setting aside for the development of climate change insurance in your country? Number one, I could do more. I'm not doing enough. I cannot do much more, or I do not know what it is about. We have 20 people participating at the moment. 23 people, 30. I do believe all of you have already participated. Have we left anybody out? The survey says that the response is very clear. The large majority of those today attending believe they could do more. It is interesting to see that the next group, the red group, doesn't know what to do. The idea of this forum is to explore what else can I do. Therefore, we need to do more. That is the homework you have for today. The rules for this workshop, which is the core for today. Now we will have the presentation on the screen for this part of the workshop. We've organized these groups having representatives from the private sector, public sector, and supervisors and regulators, and you will see that the idea is to create a dialogue space where we can understand what are the mandates from the insurance industry, the mandates from the supervisor, the Treasury, the Ministry of Education mandates, all those that perhaps are involved in these types of initiatives, and to reach a conclusion in this workshop. This workshop is comprised by these representatives, and we also try to include in the group a consultant or a panel member who participated at the beginning of today's presentations. The idea is for you in your group to select one spokesperson who will convey the group conclusions and findings discussed in your groups and present it in a plenary session. Please appoint the group spokesperson. Also, the panelist consultant who participated in the morning will play the role of facilitator and monitoring time and making sure that there is an even participation and not an uneven participation. The idea is for all of you to share your experiences, and the facilitator will be monitoring this. Each of you in your table knows who your facilitator is. The task in hand for the next 40 minutes is the following. Put yourself in someone else's shoes. Today we've seen that Danny, in his initial presentation, mentioned that it is important to change. Everybody plays a different role, and it's important to take steps forward precisely to maximize in an effective manner and respond to the first question of the survey. How can I do more? For which it's important to understand what's motivating factors behind the industry, what is motivating the policymakers and supervisors for them to be actually involved in these types of climate insurance interventions. And what I will ask from you is that in this first part of the workshop, each and every one of you as industry representative, supervisor or policymaker representative, share with the rest of the group your legal mandate. The supervisor most likely say is to protect consumers, ensure stability of the financial sector. The industry will respond. Mine is the ROI to shareholders. And the idea is for each of you to share your mandates from your angle to have a comprehensive understanding that all of you need in these types of initiatives. The second question that would like for you to ask yourself, why the climate insurance development is important for each of you. Why is it important for the industry or the public policy maker or the supervisor and the regulator? After this, we will quickly share with you what are you actually doing, and then next, why is it difficult to do more? You were very clear saying that yes, you still can do more in the survey a couple of seconds ago. What is preventing me precisely to do more? And all of this will be very crucial, as what I will ask you after these 40 minutes is to invert the roles you have played. The industry representative, having understood the mandate and the interest by the industry on advancing on climate change, insurance today will become as the industry will become the supervisor regulator. The supervisor now, after understanding concerns and mandates and the interest on climate change insurance, will assume the role of the supervisor. That is the idea, to change hats, for which first you need to understand what the counterpart needs and their needs. And we will be tracking these 40 minutes, for which we have proposed the following idea. The industry representative in this table will start. There are 3 industry representatives that give their own inputs, and in each group only take no longer than 10 minutes per question and address all the questions in 40 minutes. And then please go ahead, start your exercise. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. You have 10 more minutes.
Empecemos a
Kindly,
recapitular.
please start
Con
to
respecto a los
summarize
mandatos.
the
Entonces, de
mandates.
las notas que yo tengo en este grupo,
I have some
para el
notes
sector
from this
privado,
group.
la
For
industria,
the
hay un
private
mandato muy
sector
claro,
industry,
es
there's
el
a clear
retorno.
mandate,
Y es
which is
importante que las
return.
soluciones que se ofrezcan sean
Solutions
escalables,
offered need to
sostenibles en
be
el tiempo y que
scalable,
efectivamente
sustainable
se
throughout
ofrezca
time,
un retorno a los
and that
accionistas.
a return over
¿Alguien
investment
de
is
los
returned back
grupos,
to shareholders.
bueno, si alguien más quiera agregar algo, quiere complementar algo
Anyone
más
else
con los
wants to add
mandatos del
anything else
sector privado?
about private sector mandates?
Hay otro mandato adicional que de hecho fue
There's an
mencionado, el de
additional mandate,
responsabilidad
which
social
is
empresarial. Es
corporate social
otro punto que
responsibility,
ha llevado a
which
la
is another
industria a
point that has
interesarse
taken the
en el
industry to
ofrecimiento de
get
seguros,
in
no solamente
to be
climáticos,
interested
sino seguros
in
inclusivos de
climate
prosperidad.
change,
¿Qué otro
in climate
mandato
insurance.
legal
What other legal mandate,
objetivo
what other
tiene que ver con
objective
este
does
tema?
the insurance industry have? The we need to advise the final consumer of their needs and what they're buying to prevent future problems.
Veíamos un poco, al
So this
ofrecer mis
mandate is
productos,
that
debo
when
de
I
ofrecerlos de
offer
manera
my
responsable y
products,
proteger al
I
consumidor
should
de manera
protect
apropiada.
the
¿Algún otro
consumer
punto para
and
complementar el
educate the
mandato del sector
consumer.
privado?
Anything else from the
Ok,
private
entonces
side?
ahora hablemos del
So now
mandato
let
del
us talk
supervisor y
about
del
the
regulador.
supervisor and regulators
Habíamos
mandate.
hablado que el
We had
mandato
talked about
legal
that the
es la
legal
protección al
mandate is
consumidor y
consumer
asegurar la
protection, ensuring
estabilidad
stability,
financiera,
financial
pues la
stability
estabilidad del sector.
of the
También un
consumer
mandato que se
sector.
menciona
A
acá,
mandate
que ha
mentioned here
surgido y que yo
that
creo
has
que muchos de ustedes lo
emerged,
perciben,
and many of you
es
see it,
el
is
mandato para
that
promover el
the
acceso
mandate
al
to
seguro.
promote access to insurance.
¿Qué tienen que compartir ustedes? ¿Hay otro mandato
Is there
adicional
any
que los
other
supervisores
additional
hayan
mandate
identificado
that
que los
supervisors
motiva
have
a
identified
promover
motivating
seguros
you to promote
climáticos y proteger
climate
los sectores
insurance,
productivos de
to
sus países?
promote inclusive insurance
Además
in
de
your
los que
country,
ya mencioné.
aside of the ones that I've mentioned?
Ok. Ahora, con respecto a políticas
Now, with
públicas,
regards to
acabo de
public
invitar
policy
a los
here, I will
representantes del
invite the
Ministerio de Economía que creo
representatives
que están
of the
acá
Ministry of the
de
Economy.
Panamá
I
para
think we
que
have a
nos
couple from
presenten un
Panama
poco
so that
cuál
you
es el
can
mandato
present to
que
us what
ustedes
is
tienen y por
the
qué es
mandate you have
relevante el seguro
and why
climático en el
climate
país.
insurance is
Porque creo que
relevant
muchos
in your
grupos no
country
tenían
because
este
many
perfil
groups did
de
not
política
have
pública y hay
public
representantes,
policy
creo que dos o tres personas.
representative. Good afternoon. My name is Janet Vergara. I work in Disaster Risk Manager, Ministry of Economy and Finance. The mandate in our ministry in terms of risk is the following. In the financial side, we look at disaster risk reduction. For this, we have two loans, one with the World Bank, or the other one with IADB, and another one with regards to flood
Algo más que
insurance
quisieran
coverage.
completar, no sé si de pronto desde la perspectiva de
Perhaps
CRIF
from
ustedes han tenido contacto con
CRIF,
bastantes ministerios,
you've
hay
had
otros
contact with
mandatos
many
que
ministries. Have
motivan
you had
a
any other
promotores de
mandates
política pública
in
para este tipo de
motivating
coberturas?
public policymakers from a broader point of view is addressing the emergency of the vulnerable population to react timely in front of this disaster and taking the vulnerable to
Pero nos podemos
shelters,
dar cuenta que
etc.
esto es como
We
un rompecabezas,
realize this is
¿verdad?
like different
Porque
pieces of
sería,
the
pero ¿cómo
same
voy a hacer yo
puzzle.
para
How
avanzar
am
en los
I
seguros
going
climáticos
to
si la industria quiere
advance
una
my
cosa, el supervisor
agenda
tiene otro
on
mandato, el promotor
climate
de políticas públicas tiene
insurance,
otra y
public
además tienen las
policy,
agencias de desarrollo
policymakers,
antes? Entonces, ¿cómo
supervisors all
hacemos
have
para
different
que
mandates.
todas las
So
piezas del
how can we
rompecabezas
put
se
together all
puedan
these
unir
different
y
pieces of the
lograr
puzzle
productos que sean
jointly,
sostenibles,
coming up
escalables,
with
pero que efectivamente
scalable,
protejan a la
sustainable
comunidad
products
contra ese tipo de
protecting
desastres
consumers
naturales?
against these
Para esto,
types of
quiero
natural
complementar
disasters?
con
For this, I would like
ciertos
to
mandatos
talk
que
about
ahora
certain
los
mandates
supervisores, los
that now
reguladores, los
supervisors,
promotores de política
regulators,
pública y la industria
decision makers,
están
and
viendo
the
desde
industry
la
are
perspectiva mucho
receiving
más global.
from a more global
Leí en su
perspective.
presentación
Danny, in his presentation, mentioned the Paris Agreement and talked about the Sendai framework, and we have the Sustainable Development Goals, and all these three mandates, these global agreements, resilience, development, and climate change adaptation, have underscored the fact that the private sector and the public sector, both including regulators and supervisors, have to take urgent measures to advance on the climate change agenda. Aside of these mandates and motivations that you talked in your groups, which are more of local needs, there are other higher level mandates where policymakers in your country participate and have created international agreements were recognizing that each of us plays a key role. Having said this, I'll go to the second point of the workshop, and is to continue putting ourselves in the shoes of the most vulnerable of others, perhaps. We are all consumers in this room. All of us have insurance coverage, most likely. Climate change, we're all very aware of managing changes, and we've covered or have insurance coverage for all basic needs. So let us put ourselves in the shoes of that end consumer. I'm not supervisor, I'm not the industry, and I will ask you to go a little bit beyond. Think in those consumers living in the very remote areas, like we saw in the picture this morning in the hut, or a consumer saying, every time that a natural disaster happens, I'm the most affected. Think in the shoes, put yourself in the shoes of that consumer specifically, and complete the map on the screen, not in a formal manner, but rather each of group will have a flip chart, and please draw that consumer in the flip chart. In your group, try to draw a picture using a consumer image. What is that consumer thinks? What are their needs, concerns, wishes? And it will be through that drawing that you are showing a picture to us of what we need to address and solve for the lives of them in the future. We talk about designing products from the consumer perspective. That's what we will be doing, but more from a global perspective. So I encourage you now within your groups to discuss precisely who is this consumer, what does he think, sees, feels, how does he envision insurance coverage, who can help him manage his risk, how will he manage those risks. Each of you will draw this. Have you played hangman when you were young? Hangman is where each of you will spell out a piece of the puzzle, or one letter of the word, or will be drawing part of the body that is playing hangman. And we will share with you the flip charts, and we kindly ask you to be very creative while playing hangman.
10 minuticos.
We still have 10 minutes. Most papers are blank, so let's move faster. Let's be creative.
And now
a invitarlos
we
a
invite
que nos
you
cuenten un poco
to share with
cómo
us a little bit of
perciben,
how do you
cómo entienden las particularidades de
see
cada uno
the
de los
specificities,
con
the
esta
needs,
este
the
grupo
realities of the
invitado
consumers
que tenemos aquí.
in this group. Who would like to start?
Bueno, buenas tardes.
Good
A
afternoon.
nosotros se nos ocurrió
In our group, we thought
presentar en nuestro dibujo
to
más o
draw
menos como un paisaje.
some sort of a landscape
Ahí pueden ver algunas casas con mucha
showing
precariedad,
houses
niños, muchos
in
niños,
very
una
remote,
familia con muchos
poor
niños.
location,
Si se fijan
homes
detrás hay
with
un
many children. In the background, there's
está
even
pasando
a
un río
volcano,
al frente.
and a river
Ese
runs in
tipo de
front of
personas
that
es muy difícil
little,
que puedan
very humble
aportar
hut
para
or
comprar un seguro.
house. And they have very little income to buy insurance coverage. So we try to put ourselves in their shoes, and we thought, well, their priority is food and shelter and
¿Cómo podrían pensar
the
en un
basic
seguro?
needs,
También pensamos
not
no
insurance
tienen conocimientos
coverage.
sobre riesgos.
And they do not
Ellos están
understand
viviendo a la orilla del
insurance
río,
risk
porque
as
cada uno de los
they
países
are
nórdicos, si nos recordamos,
subject
tenemos
to
gente que
insurance
vivimos cerca de
flooding,
ríos,
to
mares,
the river
bueno, no saben qué
overflowing,
tsunami, ellos
and they do not
piensan que eso
know
solo
about
pasa más allá del río,
tsunamis, earthquake, landslides.
casualmente pasar.
Oh, that'll happen in a place
Creo que no
far
tienen
away,
conocimiento
not
de
where I live.
riesgos.
They truly do not
Nosotros también pensamos que
understand
tampoco
risks,
tienen información
and
sobre
they
seguros,
lack
porque
insurance
siempre que compran un
information
seguro normalmente
because
muchas páginas, muchas
insurance has a lot of fine print that very few people understand. And insurers and insurance companies are not truly interested in having this group of people as their niche because they're thinking in terms of losses and ROIs. So it's very difficult for these very poor people to purchase insurance coverage because they're very poor. So in our group, we thought that we need to understand why is this a reality in the world. On the one hand, it's not profitable for insurance companies to provide coverage, and the governments are not really focusing on this group of people. I am Panamanian. Panama is a country full of contradictions. The the rich get richer and the poor are getting poorer. So the insurance market needs to get interested in this type of very poor people. Thank you very much. Very interesting when you talk about direct and indirect insurance coverage. The government can help protect these people. Perhaps there are other means to provide insurance through the government, giving protection free of costs to these very poor people. Aside, how did you describe your consumer? What other additional characteristics did you add to this consumer? In our group, we think that the consumer does have a lot of information, mainly the one that had DirecTV in the picture on the screen very early this morning. And they do hear about earthquakes, tsunamis, etc. And they see this as foreign tragedies that happen to people very far away, mainly because they're lacking education and do not understand insurance coverage, risk coverage. It's not that they are ignorant, but they think those losses happen to others, not to them. And if it happened to them, the government will pay. The government paid for the fire nearby, they reallocated us into a stadium. We lived in a stadium for quite some time, and there are nonprofit organizations donating money and food, and they fed us. So after the tragedy, they were able to live through the tragedy, and we hope that through educating these people, they will look for other types of solution to break away from that negative vicious circle and not waiting for government handouts. And then they will be through gaining more education, then one would like to get insurance coverage because now they understand the value in it. But for this, the government and the different entities and the different organizations and the different bodies have to work together to make sure that these people get educated and start having insurance coverage. Thank you. A very interesting point highlighted by this group is something, that happens to people very, very far away. That will never happen to me. It is in terms of risk exposure. I would like to ask to the other tables if they would like to describe their consumer. 1 minute per table. 1 minute for you to describe your consumer. The conclusion that we reached about this consumer, they do not have good formal education and do not have an awareness or understanding, thus lacking future perspective. They only think in today, the present, and they just watch TV, soap operas, and through the grapevine they listen to gossip. What I'm trying to say with all of this is that these people live in a very small little bubble, perhaps, and they relate with people as uneducated as them. And education would be the absolute only way to help them. If the government gives them handouts, subsidies, and they do not have to worry because the government will buy them a new tiny house if they lose their own house, then they will have very little motivation to think out of the box or educate themselves. So we need to somehow raise their awareness. Thank you very much. Is there anything else that you would like to add to describe your consumer that has not been mentioned yet? Looking at the task in hand and what is it that the consumer is thinking, envisioning, needing, basically is to improve the quality of his life, his capital, taking care of educating their kids. Those are their priorities. But not only in the poverty level, but also middle class, they're not aware of risks that could happen in the future. So risk prevention is one of the very last priorities in the minds of these two social levels that I just mentioned. And when casualties or losses happen, then the life quality goes down the drain. And that is one of the things that we as a country have lived very, very recently in Bolivia. And we say it is our own fault. Why? Because you could work in improving many of your life aspects, educating your kids, but with a single casualty or loss, you can lose everything. And risk prevention should not be last in the list, but first in your priority list to be truly protected as you should. Thank you very much. A very key point is that we have income to face events and pay for insurance coverage. But on the other hand, those others group do not have that cushion to face these losses or casualties. Now we're going to work on our case study. I gave you a handout with your case study. You do not need to respond all of the question as we will not have enough time. We have 45 minutes to work in your case, but within your group, kindly please read the case situation, and when you read each point of the case we have of that hypothetical case, please try to connect the dots with what has been said today in panel 1 and panel 2, all that has been shared by your colleagues today. Then we will address a couple of questions that are in the second page of your case. If you're not able to respond all of the questions, it's okay. But at least as a group, please focus on the first two blocks. And please put yourself in the shoes of others. Lourdes represents the company called La Positiva. She heard the supervisor's mandate, and now in her group she will put on the supervisor's hat, and Lourdes will try to understand the complications, and the supervisor will put on the hat of the industry and try to understand the industry's complexities when trying to start these types of initiatives. With no further ado, please have fun, start working in groups, and kindly, I repeat myself, please take into consideration what has been said today, and we have 45 minutes for this. Thank you.